I used to work as a custodian at a middle school for almost 7 years, mostly overnight shifts, clocking in around 10 at night and leaving just before sunrise, when the buses started pulling in and the building slowly came back to life. And at first I actually loved the job because it meant silence. No kids running down the hallways, no teachers complaining about small things, no one watching over my shoulder or asking questions, just empty corridors and humming lights, and the kind of quiet that felt peaceful. Until I realized the school was never really empty, and that the rules the previous janitor left behind weren't jokes. They were warnings I should have taken seriously from the very first night, because I remember the supervisor handing me a ring of keys heavier than anything I'd ever held and telling me there were only 3 rules I needed to remember if I wanted things to go smoothly. Never open a classroom if the lights are already on. Never respond when someone calls your name through a closed door, and always sign the maintenance log before you leave, even if you didn't do anything worth writing down. And he said it in a casual way that felt like a joke, but didn't sound like one, and I laughed because that's what you do when you're nervous. But he didn't laugh back, just nodded once and walked out into the rain, leaving me alone in a school that felt too big for a single person to manage. The halls long and quiet with that faint smell of floor cleaner and old paper. And I remember thinking how peaceful it felt at first, pushing the mop bucket under fluorescent lights while lockers ticked as they cooled from the daytime heat. The sound echoing back at me like someone else was following at the same pace, and for the first hour, nothing strange happened except a soft, humming sound from the ceiling vents that made me feel like the building was breathing, and I told myself that was normal because buildings always make noise when they settle. But then I reached a classroom at the far end of the science wing and noticed the lights were on, even though the schedule said no one had used that room since afternoon. And I remembered the rule about not opening doors with lights already on. So I kept walking, even though curiosity pressed against me like an itch under my skin. And as I passed the door, I heard movement inside. A chair scraping slowly, as if someone were dragging it across the floor 1 inch at a time. And I almost knocked before remembering the rule again, and something about following that rule felt more important than logic, like a survival instinct I didn't fully understand yet. So I walked away, and the scraping stopped instantly, replaced by silence so heavy it made my ears ring. And that was the moment I realized this job wasn't going to be as simple as cleaning floors and emptying trash, because the building felt aware of me. Not in a dramatic way, but like someone watching from behind a curtain. And over the next nights, I learned the layout of the place, the way sailors learn coastlines, memorizing which lights flickered and which doors stuck, which hallways stayed cold no matter the weather, and which ones always smelled faintly of chalk dust, even after I wiped everything down. And I began to notice patterns that didn't exist during the day, like the way the vending machine lights dimmed every time I passed, or how the clock near the gym sometimes skipped forward a minute when I looked away. And I convinced myself I was just tired, because night shifts mess with your head. But then came the first time someone called my name, soft and uncertain from behind a locked storage room door. And I froze because I was certain I was alone in the building, and the voice sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. And it said my name again with more urgency, almost pleading. And every instinct told me to open the door and check if someone needed help. But the rule came back to me, and I stepped away. To me, slowly instead, whispering an apology to whoever or whatever was behind it. And the voice stopped mid-word as if cut off, leaving only the hum of electricity and my own breathing echoing down the corridor. And after that, I began to take the rules seriously, even though no one ever explained why they existed. And the maintenance log became the strangest part of my shift, because previous janitors had filled it with notes that didn't make sense, like, "Don't trust reflections after midnight," or "The third floor bathroom mirror is delayed." And at first I thought they were jokes left by bored workers. But I noticed the handwriting changed frequently, as if many people had tried this job and none stayed long. And one night I wrote a simple entry about fixing a loose chair and cleaning a spill near the cafeteria. And when I came back the next evening, the words had been underlined, twice in red ink I didn't remember using. And next to it, someone had written, "Good. It noticed. You." And that sentence stayed in my head for hours because I couldn't figure out who it was supposed to be. And that was also the night I started hearing footsteps above me when I was on the top floor, slow and steady, like someone pacing directly over my head, even though there was nothing above but the roof. And the sound followed me from room to room, stopping whenever I stopped and continuing whenever I walked again. And I tested it by turning suddenly, and the steps halted at the exact same moment, which made my stomach drop in a way I couldn't explain. And I told myself maybe it was pipes expanding or birds landing on the roof. But deep down I knew the timing was too precise. And the longer I worked there, the more I felt like I was learning an unspoken routine shared between me and the building. Like it expected me to follow certain paths and punished me with unease when I didn't. And sometimes I would catch glimpses of movement in glass doors or polished floors, shadows that lagged behind me by half a second like reflections with poor connection. And once I stopped and stared at my reflection in a dark window and noticed it wasn't breathing at the same rhythm as me, its chest rising just a little too late. And I backed away slowly, heart racing, pretending I hadn't seen anything wrong, because acknowledging it felt like inviting something closer. And weeks passed, and I began to adapt in ways I never thought I would, timing my rounds to avoid certain hallways between 2 and 2:10 because the lights would flicker in a pattern that made me dizzy, leaving one locker untouched because every time I opened it, the rest of the row rattled violently as if disturbed. And I realized that the rules weren't just about safety, but about coexistence, like learning to live with a neighbor who had habits you didn't question. And then one night, the supervisor returned unexpectedly and asked how I was settling in, and I almost told him everything but something stopped me, like I was afraid speaking it aloud would break whatever fragile balance existed. So I just said the building was strange at night, and he nodded slowly as if that was the only answer he expected. And before leaving, he added a fourth rule quietly, saying if I ever saw someone who looked like me in the hallway, I should take the stairs immediately and not turn around no matter what I heard. And he said it in such a calm tone that it made it more frightening than if he'd sounded alarmed. And I laughed nervously again, but he didn't laugh back, just like before. And that same night, as if summoned by the conversation, I turned a corner near the library and saw someone standing at the far end wearing the same uniform as me, holding a mop in the exact same way I did. And for a second, I thought it was a mirror or another worker. But the angle was wrong, and the posture too familiar. And when it tilted its head, I felt a cold wave rush through me, because the movement was identical to my own nervous habit, and I remembered the rule and immediately turned toward the stairwell, walking faster and faster as footsteps began behind me, matching my pace perfectly. And I wanted to run, but something told me not to break the rhythm. And just as I reached the stairs, I heard my own voice calling my name from behind, soft and confused, like I'd gotten lost, and every muscle in my body wanted to turn around. But I forced myself forward, gripping the railing until my knuckles hurt, and the voice faded the moment I stepped onto the lower floor, leaving only silence and the distant hum of lights. And after that night, I started wondering if the building wasn't haunted in the traditional sense, but instead collecting pieces of the people who worked there, learning their movements and voices like recordings, playing back at the wrong time, and I began to feel watched, even during the day when I returned home, noticing small delays in mirrors or shadows that felt slightly off. And I stopped telling friends about my job because I couldn't explain it without sounding paranoid. And the maintenance log entries grew stranger, as if written by someone becoming less certain of reality. Notes like, "It hates sudden noise," or "Leave one light on in the hallway or it gets restless." And one night I broke a rule by accident when I opened a classroom, without realizing the lights were already on. And inside everything looked normal except the desks were arranged facing the door as if waiting for me, and the air felt heavy like walking into deep water, and I backed out slowly, closing the door gently, and for the rest of that shift every light I turned off flickered back on behind me as if correcting a mistake, and I apologized out loud even though I didn't know who I was apologizing to. And gradually I began to notice that my shifts felt shorter than the clock suggested, like hours disappearing without memory, and the logbook showed entries in my handwriting describing tasks I didn't remember doing, and they were written more neatly than I normally wrote, almost careful, and sometimes they ended with phrases I would never say, like routine maintained or balance preserved. And I started to wonder if I was sleepwalking or if something else was guiding me through the building when I wasn't fully aware. And instead of quitting like a reasonable person, I stayed because the mystery pulled me deeper, because part of me wanted to understand the system behind the rules. And one night near the anniversary of my first shift, I arrived to find a new rule written at the front of the logbook in handwriting that looked like mine, but older somehow. When the building feels empty, leave immediately. And that unsettled me more than anything else, because the building never felt empty before, always humming and alive in subtle ways. But that night, the air felt still, the lights steady without flicker, the footsteps above me gone. And as I walked the halls, I realized the silence wasn't peaceful but hollow, like the absence of something that should have been there. And my reflection in windows moved perfectly in sync again, which felt wrong after months of small delays. And halfway through my shift, I heard a distant door slam, echoing through the building, followed by nothing. No hum, no movement, just quiet. And I felt an urge to leave immediately, but curiosity held me in place, and I continued cleaning even though every instinct warned me I was breaking a rule I didn't fully understand. And when I finally reached the maintenance office to sign out, I saw my name already written for that night, with a note beside it saying "too late," and the handwriting matched mine exactly, but I had never written it. And at that moment I felt watched more intensely than ever before, like countless eyes just beyond my vision. And I realized the building might not just be observing, but remembering, creating versions of me from repetition and routine, and I left quickly without finishing my rounds, stepping outside into cold air that felt unreal after the heavy silence inside. And ever since then, I've had trouble sleeping, because sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear the faint squeak of a mop and footsteps pacing slowly above me, even though I live on the top floor of my apartment building. And sometimes when I pass reflective surfaces, I catch a glimpse of myself, lagging slightly behind, like it's still inside those hallways, finishing a shift that never ended. And the strangest part is that I still feel responsible for the place, as if it's waiting for me to return. And occasionally I find dirt under my fingernails in the morning, like I've been working overnight without remembering. And once I opened my phone notes to find a message typed while I slept that read, "Routine maintained." And I don't know if it's a dream or if part of me never really left the school, but sometimes late at night when everything is quiet, I swear I hear someone gently calling my name from behind a closed door, and I never answer because I remember the rules even now. And lately, I've started wondering if someone else has taken my job and is learning the same patterns I learned, following the same rules without understanding why, and whether somewhere in that building, another version of me is still walking the halls, signing the logbook carefully, keeping the balance while waiting for the moment when the building feels empty again.